My son deserves better. He always has. Don't come back.
The night was cold. Not the kind of cold you feel through a jacket. The kind that gets into your chest and stays there. The kind that makes you feel like the whole world has contracted into something sharp and mean and impossibly small. Serena Calloway stood on the front porch of a house that was not hers, holding a trash bag stuffed with what used to be her life. She was 7 months pregnant. Her feet were swollen. Her back ached with that particular pressure that made it hard to breathe deeply. And behind her, through the door she had just been pushed through, she could still hear the voices. She was never good enough for this family. My son deserves better. He always has. Don't come back. That last one came from her mother-in-law, Margaret Harlow. It was delivered with the precision of someone who had been rehearsing it for a long time. Maybe years. Serena didn't cry. She thought she would. She had braced for it, actually, the way you brace for a car accident you can see coming. But when the moment arrived, something in her went very still instead. She picked up the bag. She walked down the porch steps. She did not look back. And somewhere across the country, in a glass and steel building that sat above a city like a crown, a man named Gerald Willington, a man Serena had not spoken to in 3 years, was about to get a phone call that would change everything. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me tell you who Serena Calloway was before the Harlow family decided she was nothing. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Serena didn't grow up with money. She grew up in a small apartment in Columbus, Ohio, with a mother who worked 2 jobs and a father she had never met. Or so she had been told. Her mother, Diana, was a quiet woman who believed deeply in hard work and said very little about the past. Whenever Serena asked about her father, Diana would press her lips together, look at something just past Serena's shoulder, and say, "He wasn't ready, that's all." Serena had learned to stop asking. What she had instead of answers was ambition. She studied hard, earned a full scholarship to Ohio State, graduated with a degree in business administration, and landed a junior analyst position at a mid-sized consulting firm in Cincinnati before she was 23. That's where she met Brandon Harlow. He was charming in the particular way of men who have always been told they're special, effortlessly confident, easy with his smile, the kind of person who makes a room feel warmer just by walking into it. He was the senior account manager. She was the new hire. He asked her to dinner 3 weeks after she started. She said yes. She would spend a great deal of time thinking about that yes. Not with regret, exactly. Regret implies you would have done it differently. Serena had never been a woman who rewrote the past, but she would think about it, the way you think about the first step that started a very long walk. The Harlow family was old Cincinnati money. Not the quiet, understated kind, the loud kind. The kind that built buildings with the family name on them, sent children to private schools as a matter of course, and had firm opinions about who belonged and who didn't. Margaret Harlow, Brandon's mother, took one look at Serena and made a decision. She never said it out loud. She was too polished for that. But it was there in every interaction. On the way she talked over Serena at dinner. In the way she described Brandon's previous girlfriend to guests as such a lovely girl from a good family. In the way she would pause sometimes, before using Serena's name, as if she had to remind herself what it was. Brandon noticed. He said nothing. That was the first thing Serena missed. They got engaged after 18 months. The ring was beautiful. The engagement party was held at the Harlow estate, and Serena stood in a room full of people who had known each other for decades and felt for the first time in her adult life genuinely invisible. She married him anyway. She believed in him. She believed that love was enough to build something real, that families could soften over time, and that Margaret would eventually see what her son saw. She was wrong about all 3. The first 2 years of their marriage were not bad. They were just thin, like something that looked solid from a distance but couldn't hold weight when you pressed on it. Brandon worked long hours. His ambition had a particular shape after the wedding. It pointed outward, always outward. Toward the firm, toward his father's approval, toward the next promotion. It rarely pointed toward her. She had left her job at the consulting firm after the wedding. Brandon's family had made clear, in that elegant Harlow way, that a daughter-in-law who worked was acceptable, but one who worked for a competing firm was inconvenient. She found a new position at a nonprofit. Lower pay, less prestige. She told herself it was a compromise. She told herself compromises were part of marriage. Margaret called twice a week, not to speak to Serena exactly. She called Brandon on his cell and happened to find him at home, and the conversations would fill their living room with all the things that weren't being said. Serena would sit in the kitchen and listen to her husband laugh at his mother's jokes and feel the thin thing between them getting thinner. When she got pregnant, she genuinely believed that it would change something. It did. Just not the way she hoped. Margaret arrived the day after the pregnancy was announced and sat across the kitchen table from Serena with the posture of a woman about to deliver a verdict. "I think," she said, "that this baby deserves to come home to a proper house. Not this apartment." The apartment was 3 bedrooms in a good neighborhood. Serena had decorated it herself. "I think," Margaret continued, "that Brandon should be spending more time at the family home during the pregnancy. To prepare. You understand?" Serena looked at her husband. Brandon looked at the table. That was the second thing she missed. Over the next 4 months, Brandon began staying at his parents' house 2, sometimes 3 nights a week. He said it was about a renovation project his father needed help with. He said it was temporary. He said a lot of things. At her 6th-month checkup, the doctor asked if she had good support at home. Serena said yes. She had always been good at saying the right things. The night everything broke was a Wednesday. Brandon came home and sat across from her with the expression of a man who has been coached on what to say and still can't quite get the words out. "My family thinks," he started, that this isn't, Serena, I think we made a mistake." She looked at him for a long time. "You mean your mother thinks that?" He didn't deny it. And then Margaret and Robert Harlow arrived. She would later learn they had been parked outside waiting. And the evening became the evening that ended everything. There were words she won't repeat. There were accusations she didn't deserve. There was a trash bag assembled by Margaret with quiet efficiency, containing what she had decided Serena was allowed to take. And then there was the porch, and the cold, and the door closing behind her. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one, because I want to know, when Brandon sat across that table and let his mother speak for him, when he chose silence over his own pregnant wife, what would you have done in Serena's place? Serena sat in her car for 45 minutes, not going anywhere, just sitting. The heat was on. The windows were fogging. She had her hands on the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world, which at that moment, it was. She had a few $100s in her checking account. Her close friends were people she had met through Brandon, which meant they were really his friends, which meant they were Margaret's friends, which meant she didn't trust them with something this raw. There was a woman named Joelle, her college roommate, who had sent a text 3 months ago and received only a short reply. Serena pulled up the thread and stared at it. Then she put her phone down. Then she picked it up again and scrolled to a number she had saved under a name that wasn't his real name. She had saved it as GW, don't call, because 3 years ago she had told herself she was done with that chapter, that she didn't need what he was offering, that she had made her choice and she was going to live inside it. Gerald Willington was her father. She had found out 4 years ago, 6 months before she married Brandon. Her mother had finally told her, "The way you tell a truth you've held so long it has become a physical weight, and one day you simply set it down." Gerald Willington was the founder and majority shareholder of Willington Meridian Group, one of the 20 largest private equity firms in the United States. He had a net worth that financial journalists spent careers trying to accurately estimate. He had an office on the 43rd floor of a building in Manhattan. He had 3 other children, all of whom knew about each other, and none of whom knew about Serena. He had called her when her mother finally made the introduction. He had been, she had to admit this, gracious about it. Not explosive or denying or lawyerly, just very still and very careful, and then quietly and genuinely sorry. "I didn't know," he said. "Your mother made a choice. I would have made a different one. I want you to know that." She had met him 3 times. They had dinner once in New York. He had asked questions about her life with the particular focus of someone trying to absorb years of missed time in a single sitting. And then she had married Brandon and moved into the Harlow world and decided, without quite admitting it to herself, that she was embarrassed by the timing. That walking into a marriage while quietly discovering you had a billionaire father felt like something she couldn't explain without sounding like someone else entirely. So she had put Gerald in a separate compartment and called it boundaries and moved on. She pressed call. It rang 4 times. She was already composing the voicemail in her head when he picked up. Serena, just her name. But the way he said it, like he had been expecting this call without knowing he was expecting it, made something in her chest crack open. I need help, she said. I don't know who else to call. There was a pause. Then, tell me where you are. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me, what part hit you hardest so far? Was it the moment Brandon stayed silent? Or was it Serena sitting alone in that car, deciding whether to call the father she had barely let herself know? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Gerald Willington did not get where he was by moving slowly. Within 2 hours of Serena's call, she was checked into a hotel suite downtown under a name that wasn't hers, with a credit card that worked, a bag of groceries ordered by Gerald's assistant, and the number of an OB/GYN who had Sunday availability and an excellent reputation. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at all of it. She felt she would think about this later, like someone who had been walking a very long distance in the wrong shoes and had finally been allowed to sit down. It didn't fix anything, but it changed what was possible. Gerald arrived the next morning. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe she just hadn't been paying close enough attention before. He wore a dark coat and carried coffee and sat down across from her with the same stillness he'd had the first time they met. The stillness of a man who had learned long ago that rushing through difficult conversations only made them longer. Tell me everything, he said. She did. She told him about Brandon and the silences and Margaret and the nights alone and the trash bag and the porch. She told him about the baby, a girl, she knew that now, and what she wanted for her. She told him she wasn't calling because she wanted his money, and then immediately felt embarrassed for saying that, because she was clearly benefiting from his resources, and the distinction was complicated. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer opinions before she was done. When she finished, he sat quietly for a moment and then said, "You are my daughter." That is not a complicated sentence. She cried then, not the careful, contained kind she had trained herself to produce in professional settings. The other kind, the kind that doesn't care what it looks like. Gerald let her. Then he said, "I want to help you, not to do this my way, to help you do it your way. But I want you to know, I have people, good people. And if the Harlow family wants to make this legal and ugly, they are welcome to try." What followed over the next several weeks was a quietly organized dismantling of everything the Harlow family had assumed they controlled. Gerald didn't make threats. He didn't make loud calls. He simply existed, and his existence alone began to shift the landscape. The family lawyer Brandon had retained sent the first draft of a divorce petition designed to minimize Serena's settlement, citing her limited financial contributions and dependent status. The morning that petition arrived, Gerald's legal team made a call, not to threaten, just to introduce themselves. The tone of the divorce proceedings changed almost immediately. Meanwhile, Margaret Harlow had been doing what she always did, quietly investigating Serena's background, looking for the angle that would confirm what she had always believed. She made calls. She had her assistant run searches. She expected to find nothing of consequence. The results that came back were not what she expected. I need you to sit with this for a second. Margaret spent years treating Serena like she was beneath her family. She looked at this woman and decided, without truly knowing her, that she was not enough. And the entire time she had no idea. Does the truth change the way you see what Margaret did? Or does the money not matter at all? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Margaret Harlow found out on a Tuesday. Her assistant forwarded a financial profile, the kind written about people like Gerald Willington in Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, and occasionally Forbes, with a single line highlighted near the bottom. Willington is known to be intensely private about his personal life. He has 3 children from his first marriage and is not believed to have other family. Below that, her assistant had typed, "This appears to be outdated. See attached." The attachment was a photograph from a prenatal wellness event Gerald had quietly donated to 6 weeks prior. Serena stood beside him in the background. Neither of them had known anyone was taking a picture. The caption said nothing, but the photograph was clear. Margaret called Robert. Robert called Brandon. Brandon called his lawyer, who called Gerald's lawyer, who returned the call 4 hours later in a tone so professionally cordial it communicated everything without saying anything at all. The Harlow family held a meeting. Serena was not there, of course, but she heard about it later, from Brandon himself, who called on a Thursday night. You could tell by the way he spoke that he had been sitting with the phone for an hour before he pressed dial. "I want to talk," he said. I want to talk, not through lawyers." She thought about it. "Okay," she said. "You have 20 minutes. He came to the hotel. He sat down. He looked like someone who had not slept in several days, which was probably true. "I didn't know," he said, "about your father. I know you didn't. If you had known," Serena said carefully, "would it have changed how you let your mother treat me? Would it have changed the night you sat across the kitchen table and said nothing while she made the decision to end our marriage?" He was quiet for a long time. "Probably not," he said finally. "Not enough. I was a coward." She respected that. She didn't forgive it. There is a difference between respecting honesty and forgiving what honesty is about. But she respected it. "Our daughter is going to be born in 6 weeks," she said. "That is the only thing I want to talk about that matters." They talked about the daughter for another 15 minutes. Brandon cried briefly. She did not. When he left, she sat at the window for a while. The city moved below her, glittering and entirely indifferent to the specific weight of her particular evening. She was okay. That was, she realized, a new thing. For years she had been managing and adjusting and hoping. Now she was just okay. It felt different, cleaner, like something that belonged to her. What Brandon said to Serena in that hotel room? Probably not. "I was a coward." Some people would call that too little, too late. Others would say it was the most honest thing he had done in the entire marriage. I want to know where you fall. Tell me in the comments. Nora Calloway was born on a Thursday at 4:47 in the morning. She weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had dark hair and the concentrated expression of someone who has just arrived somewhere unfamiliar and is already taking notes. Serena held her for a long time before she let anyone else into the room. Gerald was in the waiting area. He had been there for 6 hours. When the nurse came out to tell him he could come in, he stood up so quickly he knocked his coffee off the chair. He was 62 years old, and he knocked over a coffee cup because he was going to see his daughter and his granddaughter, and Serena, watching through the window, thought, "That's something." He held Nora very carefully. "She looks like you did," he said. "Your mother sent me a photograph once. You were about this old. You had the same look." "What look?" Serena asked. "Like you were already measuring the room." She laughed. It surprised her. How easy it was to laugh right then, in a hospital room at 5 in the morning, 7 weeks after her life had been packed into a trash bag and handed back to her. Brandon was allowed to visit the next day. He held Nora and was quiet in the way of people who have just had something happen to them that restructures their understanding of what matters. Serena watched him and felt something she didn't have a clean name for. Not love, not anymore, not that kind. But something close to hope. The hope that he might be better for Nora than he had been for her. She decided to let him try. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. The settlement was not what the Harlow family had intended. Serena had a legal team that did not cut corners and did not need to accept the first offer or the second. The settlement included a home, child support, and a co-parenting arrangement drafted with careful specificity. Margaret Harlow had no legally protected role in any of it. The morning it was signed, Serena took Nora to the park. It was a clear day. Nora was in the stroller, doing what very small babies do, looking at the world with enormous seriousness. A leaf, a dog, a woman in a bright yellow coat walking past. Everything was new and interesting and worth examining. Serena pushed the stroller and thought about the girl she had been before all of this. The one who said yes to dinner and adjusted her career and waited in a kitchen listening to a conversation she wasn't part of and stood on a cold porch holding a trash bag. She didn't feel sorry for her. She felt proud of her. That girl had kept going, even when she had no idea what she was going toward. Serena moved to New York 18 months after Nora was born. Not because of Gerald. Or not only because of Gerald, because she had spent a year rebuilding herself in Cincinnati, and she had learned what she needed to learn there, and now she was ready for something bigger. Gerald helped her find an apartment. He sent 3 options and said, "Pick the one that feels like you." She picked the one with the best light. A walk-up in Brooklyn with a window in the kitchen that looked over a small garden below. It was impractical and wonderful and entirely hers. She started a consulting practice. Small at first, a few clients, most referred through Gerald's network, though he had learned by now to step back and let her make the decisions. Within a year, she had 6 clients. Within 2 years, 12. Within 3, she had hired 2 junior analysts and received an invitation to speak at an industry conference in Chicago. She stood at that podium and looked out at a room full of people who knew nothing about cold porches or trash bags or 7 months pregnant and completely alone in a car. She spoke about building businesses with integrity, and the room leaned forward. They didn't know who her father was. Some of them might have recognized the Willington name in passing, but they didn't know that. What they knew was her. What she had built. What she said. That was the part that mattered. The Harlow family had a difficult year. Margaret, especially. The story had leaked into Cincinnati's social world the way these stories do. Not all at once, but in pieces, through whispers at the right dinner tables. Nobody said anything directly. That was not how that world worked. But the silences at certain gatherings changed. The invitations slowed. The foundation Margaret had spent 30 years building had a crack in it now, and she couldn't mortar it over because the truth was the crack. Serena did not engineer any of that. She was too busy building something real to spend time pulling down what was fake. Nora grew into the kind of child who makes adults feel quietly watched in the best possible way. She had opinions about everything, delivered with great seriousness and occasional dramatic flair. She called Gerald Grandpa G without being taught to, simply because she had decided he was hers, and Gerald had never in his life received a title he valued more. Brandon was present. Not perfectly, not always, but genuinely. Which Serena had once believed was not enough, and had come to understand was actually a great deal for some people. He showed up. He was warm with Nora. She could see him slowly becoming the person he might have been if he had chosen differently. She was glad for him. She was glad for herself. She was glad for Nora most of all. Nora, who would grow up knowing that her mother stood on a cold porch with everything taken from her and did not crumble. That she walked forward in the dark. That the walking was what mattered. That is the part of this story I want you to carry. Not the twist, not the reveal, not the fact that the woman they threw away turned out to be the daughter of one of the most powerful men in private equity. The fact that before any of that came to light, before the legal team and the settlement and the conference stage in Chicago, she picked up a trash bag. She walked down a set of porch steps, and she did not look back. That image stays with me. Serena walking down those steps in the cold, 7 months pregnant, not looking back. She didn't know yet who she was about to become. She just kept moving. Does this story remind you of someone you know? Or something you've lived through yourself? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to hear from you. That is the story of Serena Calloway. A woman they decided was nothing. A woman who turned out to be everything. Not because of whose daughter she was, but because of who she chose to be in the worst moment of her life. These are the stories that rarely make headlines. The women who are quietly, steadily, without applause or permission, building something extraordinary out of what they were left with. That is exactly what this channel is for. If this story moved you, if you sat with it, if it reminded you of someone, if it made you feel something real, please like this video. Subscribe to Underestimated Saga so you never miss a story like this one. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And leave a comment telling me what part of Serena's journey hit you the hardest. Every single comment gets read. Everyone. I will see you in the next story. These women deserve to be heard.